So then, one way of doing discourse analysis is through visual analysis, through thinking about how the images that are portrayed to us change how we interpret a particular word in the world. So this is a little mini video looking at what well-being looks like, or indeed, who does well-being look like? And this is an experiment that I did 5 years ago in 2015, where when I Googled the word well-being using Google Images, these 3 images appeared in the top 2 lines of my results. Now, obviously, a Google search or any search engine will have adapted to your previous searches. So this is partly about what the algorithm thinks I should think well-being looks like. But we see here in the top left a kind of standard image that you get in the UK particularly. It's a bit of a cliche when the news reports on young women achieving their GCSE or A-level results. And there is a cultural cliche that 16-year-old and 18-year-old women will jump for joy in a rather playful interpretation of what it means, this moment of kind of coming of age where you get these great exam results. But you can see here, of course, that these girls are able-bodied, even though they're in silhouette. And we move from them to looking at this image of a white woman who one may imagine is probably quite middle class. We can't quite read that from the way that she's dressed, but she's certainly able-bodied, and she's certainly the kind of person that wants to sit on the edge of a freezing cold lake in a forest meditating. In the bottom right-hand corner, of course, we see a heteronormative white middle-class family who have enough money to put food on the table and enough time to eat together and uphold a very kind of conservative idea of what family values are. Interestingly, when I put the phrase cultural participation and well-being into Google again 5 years ago, what you see is a very bizarre mismatch of images. So in the top left, we can see what looks like some kind of board meeting, team meeting, where someone is ill, as in they don't have well-being, and other people are looking on at her rather disdainfully. And there happens to be a woman of colour in this image, which is the only reason that I can think of that it might be deemed cultural. In the top right-hand corner, we see people once again taking up the cross-legged pose that brings you the repose of well-being, except that obviously these people look actually pretty damn miserable. Now, in the bottom 2 panes, you can see some very joyful people enjoying things which could quite clearly be considered cultural participation in communities. So on the left-hand side, we either have a dance class or an exercise class, and on the right-hand side, we have someone singing. So a lot of well-being literature will tell you of the benefits of dancing and singing for older people, and these manifest in these ideas of what cultural participation and well-being might look like. So a few weeks ago, I repeated this test in Google using their image search function. And interestingly, this is what well-being now looks like. No people, just this kind of multicolored idea of well-being as including different aspects of life, you know, whether it's how you feel mentally, your love life, how you feel about others, how the quality of your relationships or the planet. This idea that well-being is multidimensional is obviously something that's present in discourse in a way that wasn't quite so much the case in policy literature, especially 5 years ago. Now, what I was interested in is maybe if I select, because when you search Google Images or Google or any kind of search engine, you can specify the image type. So when you specify photos, Sometimes it ignores you and continues to show you these multicolored, multi-dimensional, everyone's included representations of well-being. But again, the images themselves are quite similar in feeling. It's lots of people at peace or joyful in nature with sunlight and good, well, just generally good lighting. So what about this combination of cultural participation and well-being? So here we have it again, where I've specified the image type as photos. And I felt quite encouraged by the improvement of the idea of cultural participation and well-being as something which is culturally diverse in a way that wasn't visible in the representations 5 years ago. Now, one thing to point out is that these are my image results. So one thing that I have to own up to is in the bottom right hand corner. The second image in is actually a book that I've been published in since I did the image search in the early parts of 2015. So you can tell that I'm sure if you search cultural participation and well-being, the image of the front cover of my book doesn't come up, for example. But I was encouraged by the increase in cultural diversity, but also must acknowledge that my research has changed to incorporate inequality, diversity, social mobility, and some of the other issues that cultural policy needs to be concerned with, and that the image search in and of itself might be showing me versions of well-being that it thinks I want to see. Sorry, cultural participation and well-being that I might want to see. Another thing I found interesting was that if I didn't specify photo, actually what you see is the representation of the relationship between cultural participation and well-being using data and graphs. So once again, the policy discourse in the last 5 or 6 years has increasing evidence and visual evidence of this relationship between cultural participation and well-being that we need to be aware of when thinking about what discourse means. These visual representations are telling us the meaning of particular keywords back to us all the time in ways that we may not be aware of, but we can certainly use these techniques to supplement other research methods that we might be interested in using in research on cultural policy and management.